On this episode,
Bitcoin is a digital currency that's not managed by a bank, it's not managed by any kind of regulatory oversight committee, if you will.
there's a guy named Hal Finney who was the first person to receive a Bitcoin transaction. When you look at Dorsey and you look at his trajectory from Twitter and just his mindset of all the things he wanted to do, and you look at where he is now. In late 2010, Satoshi's gone.
Raise your glass to mysteries, cocktails and conspiracies. Dive into these histories, cocktails and conspiracies. Raise your glass to mysteries, cocktails and conspiracies. Uncover those anomalies, cocktails and conspiracies.
I'll tell you what, he's fired up. He's ready to rock and roll. Good morning, good evening, wherever you may be, whether you're tuning in across the nation or around the world. This is another episode of Cocktails and Conspiracies. Hello again, everyone. My name is Shane Skwarek here with the esteemed Mr. Philipps. And baby,
Yo,
we are
buddy.
back. We are back.
Yeah. I don't know why, it feels like it's been forever, but it hasn't been. We recorded last week.
You know, I was just thinking that before we hopped on,
Right.
that I'm like, I was looking at my hair. I'm like, man, my hair's getting like so long again. I'm like, I got a
Long
haircut.
gray.
We haven't recorded since I got a haircut, but we did record last week.
Yeah.
However, that was the simulation theory. So maybe we didn't record. Maybe
Maybe
we
we
did.
didn't.
Who knows? Cheers. As always, it's a pleasure to be
Sláinte.
back here with you, as always.
What do you got tonight? Another G&T?
Pretty much a little Bombay, club soda, a little splash of lime. It's just kind of a go-to. I'm running
is.
through the gins that are circulating in my home bar here. So
Well, that's a good idea. I like it.
you made a big hoopla about your perfect pour just a minute ago. So
Oh, it was such a good pour. I mean,
For
it's gone now.
audience.
It's not. I mean, it's just a regular pour now. But if you're a Guinness drinker, if you like the Irish Black Gold, you know there's nothing more beautiful than a beautiful pour
okay,
of some Guinness.
not a Guinness drinker, but you know the Irish Black Gold, to each their own, as I guess they would go, right? Tonight's
What do you want to talk
topic
about?
is going to be kind of derivative of where we came from with the simulation theory here. We're going to talk about Bitcoin, Mr. Phillips.
Let's
Do
go.
you have any familiarity with Bitcoin whatsoever?
Yes, I understand the premise of Bitcoin. I know what Bitcoin is as it relates to conspiracies. This is going to be one of those, and these are my favorite to do, by the way, of being surprised with some things along the episode.
Yeah. Okay. It's exciting to hear.
Yeah.
For some context here, I'm assuming at this point that most people understand to some degree what Bitcoin is, or at least have heard of it along the line somewhere. More or less, how would you describe it to that like one or two people out there that maybe have no idea what the hell it is, or to the
Sure.
people that have heard about it but don't really know what it is?
Sure, I'll do my best to give you at least my explanation of it. So Bitcoin is a digital currency that's not managed by a bank, it's not managed by any kind of regulatory oversight committee, if you will. It's on the open market. The only way to gain Bitcoin, other than purchasing Bitcoin that's already out there, is to actually mine Bitcoin. Now, you will do a much better job than I in explaining that. But that's what I know about Bitcoin, my friend. Obviously, you can then use it to purchase items. Not everybody accepts Bitcoin. It's more of an investment at this point in time, I'd say.
So yeah, I mean, people hear a lot of the times the buzzwords like decentralized and blockchain, and that's really the crutch of the technology aspect of what Bitcoin is built on. Really, what that just means is that the data for your transactions doesn't live on a central repository. It's bits and pieces spread out using a bunch of computers across the world. So when it says decentralized, it's just meaning that there's no hub, there's no middleman, there's no bank
Right.
that is facilitating this process, this transaction. think about your bank, right? Whether it's Bank of America, Wells Fargo, TD Bank, whatever you may use, all of your money goes through them, and all of their money comes generally or is overseen by the Federal Reserve if you're from the United States. If you're not, I mean, I guess really Federal Reserve probably has influence across the world.
I was just going to say,
currency, but
guess what? Even if you're not in the U.S., it's still controlled by the Fed.
yeah.
Mel Madison can tell you all about it.
What's that? Oh,
I said
that's
Mel
right,
Madison
yeah.
can tell you all about it. If you haven't
right,
checked out that episode, go back and watch it, baby. That was a fun
Telling you,
one.
You're getting good with these little call outs here. So
It's my job.
effectively, you've got an overseer, so to speak, that kind of manages all your transactions. Bitcoin, I guess the purpose of Bitcoin and all cryptocurrency was to take that away from the banks and put the power back in the people. So when you convert your currency into Bitcoin, that's why you see why it rises and falls and is in the supply and demand. That's why the rates fluctuate so much. It becomes so volatile because it is not controlled. The premise of it makes a lot of sense, right? Like you can escape the digital norms. And I think it really came into prominence around a period when Silk Road sort of rose to fame, which again, for those not familiar with that, was the Amazon of illicit activities. So people were buying and selling drugs and other paraphernalia, taking out hits on people, any sort of like illegal activities that were happening that you didn't want people to have a monetary trail with you. Like you didn't want to swipe your debit card and have that transaction listed on your bank account. People were using cryptocurrencies to go through it. And Silk Road kind of gave them that avenue to do so in a centralized place. Not to say it wasn't happening before and hasn't happened after,
Right.
but Silk Road sort of uniformed it. It made that into a business.
It was like a Skid Row Amazon, if you will.
More or less, right? There you go. That's maybe where it came from. Actually, Silk Road actually has a history of itself where the name came from specifically. So I'm misspeaking there. Why I wanted to bring it up though is because with Bitcoin has come outside of the fundamental understanding of how blockchain works, which is an episode for another day, probably not even this type of podcast, and one that's probably going to leave you confused. The creator of Bitcoin was a man named Satoshi Nakamoto, and that has dumbfounded people ever since Bitcoin's inception, because Satoshi Nakamoto doesn't actually exist. It's a pseudonym or just an alias, I guess, if you will, for somebody else. The creator wanted to keep his identity completely secret, and to this day, we have absolutely no idea who Satoshi Nakamoto is.
I wonder if he's related to Yoshinobu Yamamoto.
Is that supposed to be like a real person? I'm not sure.
He's a pitcher for the Dodgers.
Ah, okay. Well, I guess there's some plausibility there, right?
Maybe.
Maybe. Phillips, do you know anything about? Did you know prior to me kind of messaging you the other day about this topic? Did you think that this was going to be a conspiracy at all? Did you not know? Did you not give a shit?
Well, because we host a conspiracy podcast, I had a feeling there was a conspiracy involved. But I had absolutely no idea what that conspiracy is, nor do I know now.
Well, I guess that's like a nice softball for us to kind of get rocking and rolling here. The reason I thought this was interesting, I don't think most people are really going to care about Bitcoin, and I think I'm gonna rattle off a couple names here that people have speculated that have been kind of behind this. And I think if we were doing a podcast on any of these other people, this would not be notable. It's not even worth listening to because the average person is not going to know who it is. So there's a guy named Nick Szabo, who's a computer scientist who conceptualized the term bit gold before Bitcoin. Linguistic analysis, of course, shows that he has some similarities to Satoshi. There's a guy named Hal Finney, who was the first person to receive a Bitcoin transaction and was an early cryptographer who also worked on proof of work systems. So again, similarities there. He happened to also live near Dorian Nakamoto, who was another suspect. So it kind of added some speculation there. A guy named Craig Wright, who was an Australian computer scientist who claimed to be Satoshi, and though many experts have since debunked this and said this was just basically fraudulent. There's cypherpunks, which is a theory that Bitcoin was created by a collective of privacy-focused cryptographer from that cypherpunk movement of the 1990s.
I thought you said cyberpunk.
Play on words, right? That's effectively, I mean, they're playing on the cyberpunk, of course.
Yeah.
or steampunk or any of that. Cipher, because they were into ciphers and
Makes sense.
cryptography. But think about it like, a group like Anonymous, which has been very popular for hacking. Think about a
Right.
group like that existed. And those types of groups exist all over the place. There's a whole nother conspiracy we can get into, and it slips my mind right now about it was basically like, oh God, I wish I remembered what it was specifically. In essence, this math problem comes out on the internet, right? And you have to solve it, or whatever it was, a riddle, or whatever. And when you solve that riddle, it gives you another riddle. And you solve that riddle, it gives you another riddle. And it was a series of riddles that got harder and harder and harder. When you got to the end, there was actually a job offer for that particular person. And you joined this like elite collective, and very few people actually got there. And
Was that a real thing?
100% a real thing. Yep. 100% actually happened. Yeah. And a whole other conspiracy. It'll be a great episode to go into. It's more of a storytelling exercise, but basically what it was gearing towards was people that are into deciphering, obviously riddles and ciphers.
Right.
But it was for that like elite level thinker. And so
You know who would have
this
been good at that?
Who's that?
The Zodiac.
See?
You see what I did there?
Man, my guys tying it all in together.
You like when I interrupt you with stupid jokes?
I don't think it's an interruption. I don't know if it's a joke, but it is a good like swish to our Zodiac Killer episode.
There you go.
Maybe he doesn't exist at all. It's up for you to find out. So enough of the shameless self promotion, because you're very shameless in here. That was definitely like a popular phase or trend that was happening through the 90s into 2000s. Again, still happening now, just maybe not to the same extent as it was previously. So, and there's like Elon Musk is in there too, of course, because he's tied to everything. Is it out of the realm of possibility that it was Elon? Probably not, because he's got the technical background. He's denied it, and he doesn't strike me as the type of person that would really do that and not claim credit. I'm a big Elon guy, but he tends to really embrace that kind of stuff, and I think he embraced Bitcoin more.
That doesn't fit his MO. He's never been one to hide from the limelight. Not that he... No. He's not an attention seeker, but he doesn't shy away from it. So it doesn't seem to fit him.
Right. So that's why I dismissed that one. And there was a name that came up that's come up many times before in the past. And I thought it would make a pretty fun episode to talk about, because I think it's a name that most people would know. And if they don't know the name, they'll know why this person became wealthy, rich, and famous. And Mr. Phillips, that brings us to what I'm going to try to convince you this time, which might just be the new theme of the show, me trying to convince you that something is real, but it is fun nonetheless. Jack Dorsey. Does that name ring any bells to you whatsoever?
That he does. And you know what's really funny? When you mentioned Jack Dorsey the other day, I don't know why, like, it didn't click at first, and I'm like, why do I know that name? So I Googled him real quick, and I'm like, okay, the CEO of Square. I'm like, I knew that. I'm like, but that's not why I know him. And then, boom, it hit me. I'm like, oh, shit. He was the founder of X, or, I'm sorry, Twitter.
Twitter. That is right. That is right. Jack Dorsey has been the CEO of a couple different companies now. More recently, he created Twitter knockoff Blue Sky, but has been dumped off that board as well. Not just your typical Silicon Valley suit, so to speak. I don't know what you're doing messing with your headset over there, your microphones, but you just...
Had to do a little fix.
He co-founded Twitter in 2006 with Noah Glass, Biz Stone, and Evan Williams, obviously taking what was a simple idea of microblogging, which I think the character limit was 140 at the time. Was it now? Is it one? No, it's way more than 160 now because you got the extended ones.
It's way more than that. I think it was 140 for a long time.
I think the concept was like a text message, an SMS message was 140 characters. And then you could post that up there. And it was a stark contrast to the MySpaces of the world. And then subsequently the Facebooks, which would overtake MySpace.
Yep.
I don't know that Twitter ever overtook any other social media platform at any point. But I think it did become sort of the go-to social network for celebrities, because they seem to really gravitate towards it, as it gave them a way to speak out to like Facebook was friend. Well, MySpace was too. MySpace was friends. You friended people. Facebook was friends in sort of like an elite level of that, just doing that better. Twitter became like almost like an echo chamber, right? You talk out to people and they can respond to you, and you can choose as a celebrity to respond back. So I think its burst really came from the fact that as a fan of somebody, you can respond to somebody, and even to this day, like, you get excited if they like your comment, tweet it, or retweet it, or respond back. I mean, you and I have done this 1,000 times.
Yeah, the first time Jimmy Corsetti responded to something that I put out on X, actually, it wasn't through our CR, Twitter or X handle, if you will, and I was like, God damn it, I should have used that one.
Well, and so, I mean, we're going to sound like we're constantly obsessed with Jimmy Corsetti because he comes up every podcast. Tim is, don't get me wrong. We tweeted you the last time for the last episode, or 2 episodes ago. But yeah, so I mean, it's an exciting piece, and honestly, it gives you access. We've gotten plenty of guests. Almost all of our guests initially came from Twitter, just cold reach out. So it's really cool to be able to connect with people on that level based on likenesses. In any case, Twitter blows up by 2008, though. He gets kicked out as CEO by his own crew, ends up returning back in 2011 as the executive chairman, where he was then juggling Square, which has subsequently become Block, which is his payments empire. So a multitasker, familiar with technology, and obviously in that finance space as well.
Yeah.
Now, there's some important dates there, Mr. Phillips, and I want you to remember these dates.
I'll write them
Twitter
down.
starts in 2006. Jack Dorsey's kicked out in 2008. Jack Dorsey returns in 2011. Okay?
Okay.
Twitter's
6, 8, 11.
2006, 2008, 2011. Correct.
All right, let's go.
Okay. When you think about Twitter, the early days of Twitter, and I guess, again, Elon Musk's version of it in X, the premise has largely been what? What has Elon pitched Twitter as?
I know isn't his vision for X to be like the be all end all of everything. Like, he wants you to be able to do everything, to make purchases, to be able to essentially,
For sure.
anything you need to do on a computer, you could do on X.
The everything app. I want you to
The
step back
everything
off
app.
the
There we
everything
go.
app.
That's a good one.
Why? Look, when he was going into Twitter, if you can remember this, what was the point? Why did he care so much about spending whatever it was, $47 to buy Twitter?
Well, because he was very concerned with the censoring on the platform, and he's a free speech advocate, my friend.
He's a
which
free
is why
speech
I'm
advocate.
and that's why I'm an Elon advocate.
Right. And so that was sort of the crutch of why Twitter became so popularized too, because again, you weren't communicating within your own echo chambers of the people that you befriended yourself with. Now you can sort of speak out to a crowd. And after the allure of just a celebrity sort of speaking out to you wore off, people started to engage more. And Elon famously calls it a public town square.
Yep.
And that has resonated with me a lot as I've sort of thought about this Twitter now, and I've thought about Bitcoin, and I thought about the overarching picture is the idea, emphasis again now, but this was the idea that Jack had in the very beginning was, I want this to be a place where independent people, journalists, or just the average Joe Schmo, like your favorite conspiracy realists, cocktails and conspiracies here, can go out there and they can talk freely and communicate and share banter. You're not, again, centralizing communication through a news network. You're having discourse, and you're having it openly. And so Twitter became from the celebrity echo chamber to a community town square, this big hub, and it gets super chaotic, and people can do kind of anything they want. There's been waves of how popular it is, and then, of course, we went to the censorship era very briefly, and we're back to that same kind of piece there. But the idea, right, the DNA that Twitter was founded on was this idea of openness and sort of a decentralization, choice term there, of communication. Tech world, Mr. Phillips. Satoshi Nakamoto didn't just stumble upon Bitcoin. It wasn't like it was playing No Man's Sky, as I referenced in our simulation episode, and he found this coin in his simulation. In order to launch Bitcoin into the world, he had to carefully construct and build this, I hesitate to call it a platform, but build this concept. In order to do such a thing, you need a mastermind, like one of the best, if not the best of the best at cryptography, coding and an understanding of economics, right? Because you're effectively building a currency, digital currency, at a time when digital currencies kind of don't exist, but that's effectively what you're building here. So when you think about the requirements of what it takes to actually craft the components of a decentralized currency like Bitcoin, it immediately eliminates kind of your average Joe Schmo and then puts the onus down on it's got to be somebody from a Silicon Valley type background. Not necessarily saying they're from Silicon Valley.
Sure. Okay. But somebody with that technical know-how.
Somebody with that technical know-how. And again, Jack Dorsey is not the only person in the world that has technical background. He's certainly not the smartest person in the world either, but he certainly fits the mold. Not convincing enough, I get that. Birth of Bitcoin. Take a wild stab at when Bitcoin was invented, when it was birthed, when it came into fruition.
I'm going to say sometime between 2007 and 2008.
Interesting. In 2008, Satoshi unveils Bitcoin for the very first time. In late 2010, Satoshi's gone. He disappears. And he's never heard from again.
Interesting.
What were the dates I had mentioned before?
So 2006, Twitter was founded. Jack left in 2008.
He was ousted in 2008.
Ousted, correct. He was ousted in 2008 and came back in 2011.
He was brought back in 2011. Satoshi Nakamoto created Bitcoin and unveiled it to the world in 2008, and he disappeared in 2010, late 2010, leading into 2011. Okay.
Very interesting dates.
I'm setting the stage here. I'm setting the stage here for you because this is not the first time that happens. Dorsey's getting Twitter running in 2006. He obviously gets ousted in 2008. This is a guy now that just built one of the world's biggest platforms in a short period of time. So he's now got the technical know-how, and he's now got all of this free time on his hands where he's not noted to have done anything whatsoever, right? Mm-hmm. All of a sudden, he's free during this critical launch window. And by the time he's back at Twitter, Satoshi sends a final message saying, I'm moving on to other things. Coincidental message that he's just moving on. Timing works out really well. There's some other important dates that kind of factor in when you start to talk about Jack. And this is where things kind of got me a little bit more, Phillips. The first Bitcoin transaction was on January 11th, 2009. The last mined block by Satoshi was on March 5th, 2010. And Satoshi joins the Bitcoin forum on November 19th. Okay? Now, these dates are known publicly because the way Bitcoin works is it creates a ledger, a public ledger. So every transaction that ever happens, it's publicized. You can see what it is. And, there's aliases tied to it. You don't know what the person's Bitcoin address is, but you can see what their alias is and so forth.
So when you say, real quick though, when you say every transaction, are you talking about when the comment, so if I had some Bitcoin and I made a purchase utilizing Bitcoin, that's going to be recorded somewhere?
Transactions are being recorded everywhere, yeah.
Well, I don't like that one bit. That doesn't sound any more decentralized.
It's not necessarily going to say it's you doing it.
Right.
But like when you're buying and selling, if you're mining the Bitcoin, it's logged because you're transferring Bitcoins, right? So it's showing where it's transferring to and from different addresses, right?
Fair enough.
So you can track these particular things back to Satoshi. I'm not a Bitcoin expert, so I might be misspeaking on some of this stuff, but it exists out there. So January 11th, first Bitcoin transaction ever is processed. March 5th, Satoshi's last mine block, the last time he mines something, which is just a complex series of mathematical equations. As the equations get more difficult, you find more Bitcoin, which is why people are using so much compute power to do it.
Right.
November 19th is he joins the Bitcoin forum. Okay, simple dates. January 11th happens to be the same birthday as Jack Dorsey's mom. Jack Dorsey's dad is born on March 5th.
Oh.
Take a wild stab when Jack Dorsey's birthday is, Mr. Phillips.
Would it possibly be the 11th?
The November 19th would have
or
been
19th rather.
Yes, that was the third date.
That was close. So there's a lot of dates. You've thrown out many dates so far.
I know, I had thrown many.
There's so many of them.
Three of the most important dates in Bitcoin's history. The first transaction, the day the inventor actually joins the public forum of all the people that are a part of it, and the last time he mines a coin, all aligned perfectly to important dates in Jack Dorsey's life.
That is interesting.
Random? Coincidence? We talked simulation theory last week. Is it possible that this is lined up just accidentally? Perhaps. But those milestones, man, to be aligned like that, that's like cosmic level coincidence. Am I overthinking that?
It is. I just find it odd that, let's say Jack Dorsey was the inventor, creator of Bitcoin. Like, why would you wait for why would you wait to do those specific things on those dates? You know what I mean? Like, I guess, yeah, there's significance, right? But I don't know. It's weird, dude. It's very weird. I'm not saying it isn't. It's interesting evidence for sure.
Because when you create something big, you leave an Easter egg. We see it in movies. We see it in video games. We see it in music. People love leaving their fingerprints all over everything.
That is true.
And Jack Dorsey's often talked about being that, like, the fame doesn't really drive him. Even now, I mean, he's very wealthy. He is famous, but he's much like Tom from MySpace. Tom was on everyone's friends on MySpace with one picture. Most people have never seen another picture of Tom. He got his money. He built a platform that changed the world. And he disappeared, and he's never been on social media again. I mean, I think he joined Facebook very briefly, put up one new picture, and did kind of the same deal. Yeah. But it's very different. It's not like a Mark Zuckerberg is very out there. He's very in front. Yeah. Like, he's a guy that was very quiet. And sort of he wanted the fame. He enjoys that scene. Dorsey, he's off the grid, basically.
Yeah,
right?
The average person walking down the street would have no idea who Jack Dorsey is if they saw him. I probably wouldn't recognize him right away. You know what I mean?
He just look like a random scraggly dude with a beard and a white T-shirt. That's all.
He'd look like a dude.
Yeah, and so when you start to look at building something like this, right, that could fundamentally change anything, there's a couple of reasons that maybe you don't want to share your identity. Maybe you just don't want the credit. Maybe you don't want the credit because it's life-threatening. If people know that you created this, they're going to assume that you can get more Bitcoin. And if it takes off, what are they going to do? They're going to try to come after you because they want to become wealthy. How do I get the final Bitcoin? So on. But he's going to want to leave his mark, because if this does change the game, as maybe he hopes at some point, you want to prove that you did it, but you also want to go back and, like, maybe you want to live in history in some way. All of us are a little self-absorbed in some way, a little conceited, a little cocky. You want to be remembered for something. And Twitter probably, I mean, it could be those things. It probably won't be. Now that Elon has taken it over and is, in my opinion, probably yours as well, elevated it to new heights.
Yeah, but I mean, he resurrected it.
He resurrected it.
That platform was essentially all but dead. I mean, and not in terms of the usage. There was still a lot of people using it, but in terms of what you could do on it, it was limited to a very small sector of the population.
But, like, people that were using it was all bots. It was nonsense on there. It
was a lot of bots.
Like, it's just you posted on there, and you got like a bunch of like just garbage comments that would just drown out the post and the point of it. So I can see a reason to leave those fingerprints, and when you align those dates, it's sort of, again, those Easter eggs to people. Could it have all been coincidence? Sure, absolutely. Could it have been somebody else, just maybe that was a fan of his doing it? Of course, as well. I think it's important, though, to look at his personality a little bit. Sure. And his whole shtick, Satoshi's whole shtick was sticking it to the man. Didn't like banks, wanted to stick it to the banks. Didn't like governments, didn't like centralized overlords, if you will. Bitcoin's supposed to be a middle finger to traditional currency, to the dollar, to the Fed, to this idea
to the machine.
To the machine, exactly. It's Rage Against the Machine, Mr. Phillips.
Exactly.
That can apply to anybody that's going to be in that cypherpunk phase, or anybody that's in that hacking world. It can apply to all of them. So, that's why the tech bro thing is, you can't really escape that. Dorsey aligns with that. That's who he was. That's who he is still today. And in so much as in 2001, this is before Twitter was officially launched, he actually wrote about wanting to make a mark without leaving a trace. Again, very important words that he muttered from himself. Satoshi Nakamoto? Just throwing it out there?
Possibly left his mark without leaving a trace.
Oh, well, right. And that's it. I mean, granted, you can leave little breadcrumbs along with the trace, but that would be potentially what that is. In 2003, he goes on this rant about ditching the US dollar for a barter system.
Oh, okay.
Again, Federal Reserve corrupt, just going on and on about that, how we should go back to some sort of a bartering system. So Jack Dorsey is not a stranger to financial rebellion and has been preaching about it for decades. 2001, 2003, launches Twitter, 2006, by 2008, Bitcoin's there. So all span to 10 years. I mean, your mindset doesn't change that dramatically, especially now that you are financially free enough to pursue other interests that don't necessarily require you to make money to survive. When you're ousted from Twitter, it's not like you're broke. You're a multimillionaire.
Yeah.
Probably not a billionaire, but probably a multimillionaire, probably a very hefty salary.
Yeah. And not only that, right? I mean, the guy was the CEO of Square. It's not like he doesn't have financial, knowings, if you will.
Right. Well, so that's an interesting pivot right there, Mr. Phillips, because he goes and creates Square, or goes becomes the CEO of Square, converts it to Block. I guess it's the new name of it now. What do you think Block stands for?
Sounds like blockchain to me.
It sounds like blockchain, and that's exactly what it is. Since stepping down from Twitter to focus on Block, or now I'm going to confuse the words, but Square Block, they've become this. It becomes like a Bitcoin obsessed company. It's pumping millions of dollars into crypto. So again, he's not just a fan; he is now a disciple, and he's spent many times, even when he was on Twitter. When he makes his grand return in 2011, he's boasting about Bitcoin. And I think, I don't know this for fact, but I think I remember reading that he was talking a lot about kind of what Elon's talking about with X payments is integrating some sort of a cryptocurrency into Twitter. But he was a huge, huge advocate for it, and then put his money where his mouth is, quite literally with Block, and pumping all his money in this Bitcoin.
That is interesting.
Guy's a noted libertarian. And so his push here now comes, and very much alignment with Satoshi, is Twitter gives you a voice. Bitcoin is now giving you financial freedom.
You know what's really funny?
Same coin.
As you were going over the mindset of Jack Dorsey, I was going to say, is he a libertarian? Because he sounds very libertarian to me. Boom, nailed it.
Again, these are not traits that are necessarily exclusive to him either. They can be applied to just about anybody that is in that space.
Sure.
Okay. Satoshi, he writes a white paper on the forum, writes a lot of posts once he joins this Bitcoin forum. They're very crisp. They're very direct. There's generally no fluff. I mean, maybe I'm asking a rhetorical question here, but what does that kind of sound like to you in very short, crisp, direct posts?
Maybe a tweet?
Maybe a tweet or two. Again, short, sharp, and clear. You've had linguistic nerds that kind of dove into that a little bit and tried to like sniff out some parallels. Of course, they can prove it and disprove it. Excuse me, I got a cough.
Yeah, proving it, disproving it, those things are so tough. And we've talked about this a lot. I mean, we talked about it with the Zodiac. We talked about it with Jack the Ripper. It's like, when those linguistic experts are looking at, the verbiage and the notes and the letters, and I don't know, man. It's how do you prove that? That's so tough.
Very difficult to prove that, right? And again, it comes down to circumstantial. You nailed it right with the Zodiac, which has seemingly been like a hotbed for a lot of our conversations lately between
I know, right?
Jack the Ripper and this.
I kind of feel like we're in a simulation theory. We just keep coming back to talk about the
baby,
Zodiac.
It's all connected. Maybe that simulation theory was a good episode for that reason.
We sound like such tools. We keep bringing up our old episodes.
Well, maybe encourage somebody to go watch it. Like, subscribe. You get the deal. So circumstantially, I mean, those things I don't hold a lot of weight to it, so I wouldn't really hang my hat on any of those. But there was an interview with one of my favorite podcasters and one of your least favorite, Lex Friedman, back in 2020. Jack Dorsey comes on the podcast.
He's a great guy. I just fall asleep.
So interesting. He's
so smart. I mean, he's one of the smartest people on planet Earth.
Yeah.
I can't. Sorry, Lex.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to sit down and talk to him in person. I would never want to do it like this. I'd want to sit down and really embrace it. But I don't know if it could be a podcast. He wouldn't really jive. And he's a 3-hour guy, too. Unless he wants us on his podcast, then I'm happy
to do 3 hours. Dude, we can do 3 hours.
I don't know what we talk about with him, though. You know, he's
I don't know.
way too scientific for me. In any case, he sits down with Jack Dorsey. And one of the things I love about Lex is like he's not the beat around the bush kind of guy. When he sat down with Zelensky, when he sat down with Putin, he asks him straight up the questions that we all are wondering. And so he asked Jack Dorsey outright, "Are you Satoshi Nakamoto?" Jack Dorsey, of course, responds, "No. And if I were, would I tell you?" So not denying it.
It's a good answer.
He's dodging it.
Right.
When you
Well,
compare
not really.
that,
He said no.
well, he said no. And if I were, would I even tell you? So dodging the question. He's worn like Satoshi t-shirts, Bitcoin t-shirts all over the place, like very actively throughout the years. Like, again, could just be playing into the idea that it was a conspiracy, but
Sure.
just about everybody else that's ever been asked that question has outright denied it and really been aggressive with it, or have like tried to say that they were and not been able to prove it. So it just felt unique that Dorsey is not going to confirm nor deny it, and he just sort of dances around it without really
interesting
leaving
note.
any speculation. We talked a little bit about addresses before, and again, not being a crypto guy myself, I can't speak to too much on how it works, but you can create vanity Bitcoin addresses. And Satoshi's was a lowercase j, a capital D, the number 2, and the letter M. JD2M. Does anything sound interesting to that to you?
Well, the JD certainly stands out, as in Jack Dorsey. What do you think the 2M could mean? Do you have any ideas?
Well, Jack Dorsey actually used to live at 2 Mint Plaza in San Francisco.
Oh, okay.
Jack Dorsey 2 Mint, JD2M.
There's a lot of parallels here. I'm liking it.
An interesting number of parallels. The original Bitcoin code was time-stamped at 4 o'clock in the morning. Jack Dorsey is known to be awake. In fact, in his 2003 bio, he writes, awake at 4 a.m., coding, or always awake at 4 a.m., coding at 4 a.m., something to those details. Tiny little details like that.
Right,
Breadcrumbs, Mr. Phillips. And again, there's nothing that really connects these two definitively, right?
Right.
It's breadcrumbs. It's little bits and pieces that get sprinkled on that have just, as I keep hearing them and keep digesting them, I'm like, all right, well, this is really freaking interesting. This is really cool. All right. Every time I start talking for too long, Mr. Phillips, that's why you got to interrupt me every once in a while. It gets me shaken up here. I'm going to get a little deeper into here because this becomes more of like a little bit of a geo trail. 2009, Satoshi slips up, logs into an IRC chat, and his IP pings in California.
The fuck is an IRC chat?
It's like AOL Instant Messenger right before there was AOL Instant Messenger. It's like, you know what Slack is?
Yes.
So Slack is based on IRC. Like that's what IRC used to be. And then now it's like converted to Slack where it's like an application. So you kind of like dial. Okay. It's like an AOL chat room where you like pick the chat room to jump into, but like you have to know the address for it.
Got it.
Anyway,
Okay.
his IP address is pinging in California, where of course Dorsey is based, and that's in 2009. So Twitter is there. He's out of Twitter at this point, but it's interesting because he's still living in that area.
Sure.
In 2014, his email is hacked, and the hacker hints about a St. Louis tie, which is Dorsey's hometown. Nothing ever came from that. And then, of course, like I said, Dorsey's spotted all the time in Satoshi-themed gear at the Super Bowl. I don't know if it's like a hint or if it's like an intentional like jab saying like this is who I am, or like I get it. You guys think that this is me doing all this stuff.
Right.
Don't really know, man. I don't really know, but I
It's like
find that to be really fascinating.
Like the John Titer guy wearing John Titer shirts, or John Teeter, as we find out is his real name.
Right, exactly.
Which
Walking
I still
around
can't
just
get
saying,
behind.
teeter me. Yep.
Yeah.
I can't either. It's gonna be tighter for me forever.
I know.
The disappearance, though, that's the one thing. That's the one last piece I really want to kind of touch on here. Satoshi's last login was December 13th, 2010, before he outright disappeared. And that's right before Twitter then gets tangled into a WikiLeaks court mess.
Yeah, I remember
Dorsey is still on the board at this point. So he's obviously juggling chaos. So Satoshi disappears. Dorsey's going through court. By March 2011, that is when he becomes the Twitter executive chairman and Square's boss. And a month later, Satoshi's gone for good. Never hear from him again. So if you look at the trajectory from 2006 to 2011, it seems like every time Dorsey's life ramped up, Satoshi disappeared. And every time
Right.
Satoshi was out in the open, Dorsey was kind of out in the shadows. And it's a weird alignment for somebody. And is it a smoking gun? Of course not. But I don't know, man. I find that just to be kind of fascinating, just to be kind of interesting, just to see all of these small little breadcrumbs along the way that trace you back to this one guy. And the one guy that has the means, the knowledge, technically the financial backing to set all this stuff up.
And the desire.
Honestly, the desire. Yes, the desire.
That's the big piece for me, right? Like so if you were to tell me that, you know, some of the things that we talked about tonight, right? So the dates of the birthdays matching up, and the JD2M, that potentially, being his address, and those are all coincidental. They're interesting pieces of evidence. But when you bring it all, when you have all those pieces of evidence, and then you look at a guy with the desire to create a cryptocurrency, for me, that's again not the smoking gun, but that's one of the bigger pieces of evidence. And I know, somebody's desire isn't evidence. I understand that. It's not going to be proven in a court of law. That's not what we're trying to do here. But it certainly makes me think that it could be him a lot more.
Right.
Know what I'm saying?
I'm not a crypto person. I haven't really.
Nor am I, obviously.
To me, it's way too volatile. It's still kind of a sucker's game. You see all of these people. I mean, the other cryptos too, not so much Bitcoin.
Oh my God, yeah.
The
There's
rug
pumping up
pulls that are
scams all the
happening.
time.
Yeah, and people just like
Hawk Tua girl, right? The Hawk Tua coin that just happened recently.
That's a perfect example, and that's a perfect example of like how like these ledgers work, right? So like you can see who owns the bulk of what's out there. And so what ends up happening is like when she gets it and just sells it all off and dumps everything, everyone can see that it's tied to her team.
Right.
You can't hide that kind of stuff. So again, I'm not exactly sure how the ledger's supposed to work outside of that, but that's the precipice for it.
Yeah.
That's why I've kind of stayed away from it, but I understand the concept behind it, right? If you take away the central banks and you invest the money in the people, then your governments they severely lack control over what you do. Like right now,
like you can't tax it. That's the big thing.
Not even that. I mean, because there are ways around. Like if you withdraw the money to try to use U.S. currency and convert it, you can start hitting with tax and stuff. What really strikes me is like you can't artificially inflate it. So like our dollar was backed by gold, and then what they did is like 1 bar gold. Let's say it was $1. Now 1 bar gold is worth $1 million, right? And there's $1 million printed that bar gold, which actually devalues the $1 that you had originally, because now there's 1 million of those to that 1 bar. Mm-hmm. And although the price point of Bitcoin does inflate and deflate with the demand of it, the government isn't the one that's controlling that. It's economics at that point. It's the market. It's the supply and demand, right? And it's based on the other currencies that are out there, right? So like once you're in Bitcoin, you can trade Bitcoin for Bitcoin. And if all of your pricing is within that, it's not like that's deflating or inflating because you're measuring it against other currencies. Sure. Where I've found this to be really interesting is working with a lot of people overseas. They don't have access to getting money from the US a lot of times. And for most, some of them spoof their banks and they get like IDs and they sign up with certain banks and they're able to like somehow get like a US based bank that like allows them to take transfers in. Then they have to convert it to their local currency if they want to use it locally. Many of them will ask for crypto because then their country doesn't even know that they're getting the money in, and it's an easier pathway for them. You're not getting blocked. You're not getting controlled by these government entities.
And guess what happens? They then can't tax it.
They can't take it from you either.
Exactly.
They can't seize it because it's sitting in a government-controlled bank, and they don't know what you have, which is probably the most important part of it.
Right.
I see the value, for sure. And I think there will come a time that maybe we get there to these digital currencies, for better or for worse. I mean, Trump seems to be really behind it. Which,
again, he has his own coin.
Meme coin. When politics get involved, I'm always a little bit nervous, but we are going to be there. So I wonder if at some point, the real Satoshi Nakamoto comes out and tries to kind of take control over this, or if they just kind of continue to sit in the shadows. And knowing the personality of Jack Dorsey, I suspect maybe this is all we ever get is this.
Yeah.
Maybe he just continues to sit in the shadow. I mean, he tried to do the blue sky thing that failed kind of miserably. I guess some people still use it out there as a crap.
That was Jack's. That was his platform. Really. Mm-hmm. Let me ask you something, because I know that I don't want to delve too far away from what we're talking about tonight, but Blue Sky became just a hotbed for the left, right?
Yep.
And it's funny because the left were flocking to Blue Sky because of the new administration and because of obviously Elon buying X or Twitter and making it X, and then they cannibalized each other on there. You might not know the answer to this. If you're listening, hit me up, let me know. Was the intent to create Blue Sky? I just find it odd that Jack created that when we just talked about the characteristics of Jack and having a libertarian mindset and wanting discourse and wanting free speech, and then goes and creates Blue Sky, which is just a hotbed for censorship. I just find that to be super odd. And that was really my question: was what was the goal of creating Blue Sky?
So he's been back and forth working for Twitter, and so he actually created Blue Sky as a side project while working for Twitter back in like 2019. It was just a pet project. The concept was to create a decentralized social network. Twitter is still not decentralized, right? And as you look at these Web3 technologies, everyone is trying to move. And that's always been the big talk too. And I think Elon's even talked about that at some point. It's like, we should, number one, make Twitter open source so everyone knows what happens. And he's sort of lived up to that, but the open source has not been updated enough. I know they're making rapid changes and there's a lot of crazy stuff going on, but ideally you could open source and it becomes public. But after you open source it, the next idea would be to decentralize it. It's not living on servers. Oh, did you feel another one there?
Look at that pour.
The eyes are just twinkling there.
Look at that pour, baby. That Irish black gold.
Yuck. See, train of thought there. So
I do that to you all the time.
All the time, this guy. This is what I have to do. I can't even look at him in the camera. I have to look away from him. I have to look at a camera screen up here the whole time because I look at this jerk off. He's like making funny faces and doing stupid things to take
come on, it should be fun.
I'm trying to educate here, Mr. Phillips. So the idea here of creating this decentralized social network is that you're not now influenced by an entity. Like what happened to Twitter before Elon bought it.
During the
now
censorship,
influeed by who's in charge and by the governments around it.
Right.
Mastodon, you've heard of that?
Yeah.
That's the same thing. It's decentralized, and what happens is people create communities on Mastodon and they self-moderate. And that does the same thing. Is it deteriorates into just kind of chaos in this like liberal like shit.
Right.
Blue Sky, I think, got popular because people saw Jack Dorsey was behind it. It separated from Twitter. When he left, he brought it with him. It's just kind of his own personal project. But they see that and they were angry at Twitter. So what do they want to do is they wanted to go to an app that was like Twitter, but not Twitter. So they went to Mastodon, which was crap.
Well, they just wanted to go away from anything that was Elon related because they were just so. And it wasn't even. And the funny thing is, and again, how everything ties back to politics, which we're not going to talk much on this channel because we want to stay in the good graces of the overlords. I say that jokingly somewhat. It really wasn't until Elon became involved with the current administration when they all completely lost their shit and decided to leave X. It wasn't necessarily when he bought it or turned it into X or made any changes on the platform. It was his involvement in the administration.
Yep. It's fascinating, man. And I guess like that would be if you were to achieve this decentralized and social network, Elon knows that at some point he will be gone or move away from this project and wants the heart of it to kind of still live on and be open. And that's what these other platforms are for. I mean, problem is like Threads just became that same thing. It was like a cheap knockoff of Twitter. Knockoffs never work.
It was hot for like 3 days.
Yeah, it was hot because people were doing the same, and they were force feeding you into it. Anybody that had Instagram was forcing you into Threads to get you into it. It's stupidity. Now Facebook has the user base, so they were showing inflated numbers because they were just making all Instagram users into Threads users. People used it, like you said, for 3 days, and nobody uses it again. And now when they do, they're just like it's like Facebook initially, you just cross post. Why have 3 apps?
Right,
Just
makes no
cross
sense.
post the same thing in all of
Yeah.
them. But Blue Sky does stand alone. People do use it, not to the same capacity as Twitter. You just got those same holdouts that, like you said, are just motivated by opinion at this point.
Yeah.
But the concept is there. I think the idea behind it makes sense, and eventually, much of what should run society should ultimately be decentralized. I'm a big fan of software too, of open source anyway. Open source and decentralized are not one and the same necessarily.
Right.
But I like the idea of open source software because I like when you're not tied to a proprietary company. If a company folds, you don't lose
Sure.
all access to your stuff. Plus, you can see how it's built. You can find the vulnerabilities, and a community comes together and makes it better.
Sure.
WordPress is very popular. Not to completely spin the conversation off.
I was just going to ask you, is WordPress
100%.
open
Largest
source?
open
Cool.
source platform out there. Powers 35% of the internet. Whitehouse.gov is WordPress. Taylor Swift's website is WordPress. There are community members that donate millions of hours a year. I'm not saying that lightly. When I say millions, I'm not exaggerating. That is millions of hours a year. The company that founded it probably donates, a $500,000 worth of labor every year by themselves. Because they run a company too, of course, automatic, but they're donating all this time to build this WordPress. But you have a community that comes together to make this platform strong. So that's what makes them powerful. That's what prevents it from getting knocked off, or not knocked off, but like attacked or taken down
Sure.
by hacker networks, just because now you have a whole community that'll come through and find things right away and try to fix them. Weaving back, the big weave back here. When you look at Dorsey and you look at his trajectory from Twitter and just his mindset of all the things he wanted to do, and you look at where he is now, on top of Square, he's developed tons of resources that are to Bitcoin related projects, right? So you got Square/Block, the Cash App, right? That's a Jack Dorsey creation to buy, so trade cash really quickly. Now supports Bitcoin. He's got Block, BLOK, not BLOCK, which is Square, but BLOK, which is a mining system that he's developing to make Bitcoin mining more distributed and accessible to your average person, without having to have some like huge super rig to do it.
Right.
He's got a company called TBD, which usually means to be decided, but that's the name of the company. And it's Blocks, the Square version of it, Bitcoin-focused business, specifically working on building decentralized financing platforms on the Bitcoin blockchain. So he's literally building all of these businesses around Bitcoin. You got to ask yourself why. And you got to ask yourself... Now, I understand the Web3, right, which is all this decentralized building on these blockchains. That's where the internet is going towards. There could be arguments how fast it's going, if we are actually ever going to do that or not, or if it's just kind of, the topic of the week, right? Or the topic of the year, last couple of years, whatever have you. Trend. But you got to ask yourself, and this is a question that I've always had from Mr. Phillips, is you had one guy that created this, maybe a team of them, but you've got Satoshi Nakamoto that created this. The Bitcoins exist out there in the world. There are finite amounts of them, right? Let's just say, for the sake of this discussion, there's 100 Bitcoin, right? And 78, 85% of them have been found. There's a small amount left. My issue with Bitcoin, and maybe crypto in general, but specifically Bitcoin, has always been, if the guy created it, doesn't he know how to get those last ones? And could he control them? And I understand that you're solving for them and you're mining them, and it gets harder and harder as you go through, and there's mathematical equations involved. But if he built it, couldn't there be a backdoor?
I was just going to say, what about a backdoor? Right.
Couldn't there be a way around it? Now, again, maybe there's not, but go ahead.
Sure.
What were you going to say?
I mean, you would imagine that if somebody created Bitcoin because they wanted a decentralized currency, they're doing it for the good of the people. You would think that that person would have the integrity to not do something like that, even if they had the ability to do it, never utilize it, but that remains to be seen.
But then you look at all the crypto scams that have went on throughout the world, and you question, is the good of the people influenced by greed? How many people corrupt when money and power are at their fingertips?
Yeah, no, look, that's a good point. And look, dude, we talked about that a lot, right? How many episodes did we talk about? What does it come down to? Money and power, right?
Yep.
We've said it many times. I think most people that get into politics are good people who genuinely do want to make a difference and do serve the people of their community, but they're influenced by those two things, money and power. So we've talked about that a lot. So, yeah, anything's possible.
When that's lingering over your head, though, right? And maybe I'm just blowing this out of proportion. I'm oversimplifying it, and it can't happen that way. Don't know.
Yeah.
But when you're building all of these businesses on a technology that is volatile like Bitcoin, and the founder is anonymous and nobody knows who he is, you have to have a degree of confidence that this thing is here to stay and that you're not going to get rug pulled. And you're not just building one business, you're building like 10 of them.
Right.
And a lot of the crutch of your business is built on this chain, this specific chain for Bitcoin. Again, it could come a point where it becomes too big to fail. Some might argue we're out there now. I would probably disagree. Bitcoin's up. Bitcoin can crash again tomorrow. Maybe, probably won't, but I don't think it's too big to fail yet.
Yeah.
It seems to me like he's giving it a vote of confidence. And if you start to follow all of those breadcrumbs, wouldn't it make more sense that vote of confidence is because he knows who's behind it?
Right. Well, that's what I was just going to say, right? I think that, and I don't know what Bitcoin's worth right now, and obviously, you've mentioned it many times, it's volatile, it changes from minute to minute, seemingly. Mm-hmm. I don't know if those last pieces of Bitcoin, those last coins, would be worth more to him if it meant tanking all of those businesses. Does that make sense? You know what I mean? Like monetarily, like I don't know if like what that value comparison would be.
One Bitcoin right now is worth $83,000, $83,830. One Bitcoin.
It's fucking wild.
Right. And when I say that, like when I use the example that there's 100 Bitcoins, there's not 100 of them. There's a lot more than that. So we're looking at percentages. And let's say I'm actually just going to look this up real quickly. How much of the world's, I guess it would be world's Bitcoin,
makes sense, yeah,
is still unmined? 19.6 million Bitcoins have been mined out of the maximum supply of 21 million. So that means 1.4 million Bitcoins. So 6%, 6.7% remained unmined.
That's not a lot.
1.4 million. Well, I'm just saying, if it's valued at 83,000, what does that remaining value equate to? And that would be $116 billion.
All right, that's a lot of fucking money.
Is the remaining amount. Not to say that he has all of that, but there's access to it.
Right.
And remember, you can pull that at any point, right?
Right.
Like if the problems are that complex and maybe you have this backdoor built, what's to say when the number spikes up? You don't need 1.4 million. You get 500,000 of those and you're going to be a billionaire. So not to say that he isn't already wealthy, right? But there's a lot of power behind that, and there's a lot of market manipulation, because once those are out, that stabilizes Bitcoin. There's nothing else that can happen. And then the price will just continue to rise because it's limited supply and demand. So, I don't know, just fascinating to me. Yeah, man, it's just, I don't know.
Bitcoin used to really confuse me. Like when I first learned about Bitcoin,
I don't think anybody that knows about Bitcoin, Phillips.
Right. Well, but here's, and this is the simple, stupid answer for it. It's really no different than the U.S. dollar, right? Because it's a fiat currency. It's not backed by anything, right? So Bitcoin isn't backed by anything. The U.S. dollar is not backed by anything. We're not on the gold reserve. We haven't been since, I believe, the 70s, if I could think back to the Mel Madison episode. So it's made up the same way the U.S. dollar is. It's really no different than it is today. We're just used to the U.S. dollar. We're used to paper money. We're used to physical money. That's the norm. But if you grew up tomorrow, if you were born tomorrow, okay, and we stopped using paper money and everything was crypto, that would just be the norm to you. And when you look at the way it's constructed, yes, I understand the difference between actually mining for it, and I know that the dollar is supposed to be backed by gold, but we all know that it isn't. And I'm not saying that as like a joke, as if like there's no gold in Fort Knox. I'm saying like, no, we're not on the gold standard. It's literally not backed by gold anymore. It's the exact same thing.
Yeah.
It's so different.
It's not, right? And I think you make a really good point, because the next generations are going to start to see cryptocurrency a lot more. Outside of the scams that happen and the make-believe people that tell you that they get rich overnight, which most of them don't.
Right.
I think that that's going to become adopted into them quite a bit. It's going to become part of their life. And I used to make that argument. Well, the US dollar is backed. And I remember a guy that I know through finance asked, he's like, well, what is it actually backed by? Because it's not backed by gold, because we don't have that gold. And it actually did make me think. I'm like, wow, like I'm actually wrong about that. We aren't. We are backed by absolutely nothing. And so what is the difference? Now, the volatility is obviously still different, but
Sure.
I used this example before, not with you, but to explaining Bitcoin to somebody else. Is I used to play a video game. We always go back to video games too. It seems to be a common one for us. Easy to relate those.
It is.
Used to play a video game for many years, actually, called Ark Survival Evolved. You know what I'm talking about? You have any idea?
It's your dinosaur game?
My dinosaur game. So the
go.
premise, for those not familiar with this particular game, it's sort of an open world concept. I guess an open world concept where you travel back in time and there's dinosaurs and you're this character that, like, you start like a caveman, basically. You have to gain skills and acquire materials, and you build up like a wood hut, or a thatch hut, then a wood hut, then a stone hut. Eventually you get metal, and if you keep leveling up, you can eventually unlock technology and make these tech things. So you build these bases. In any case, part of it becomes politicking, right? And so you meet people that are on the server you're on. You can jump servers or worlds, and there becomes these bigger cross-server wars that happen. So you have to create alliances throughout. But what you also do is you create an economy. And there was a point in time when I started taking real dollars, real money, and I would spend $400 at a time to acquire in-game items from other people. People thought I was crazy for doing that. And maybe I was. But I'd use those, and we had set up a breeding ground within our tribe, if you will. And we were breeding dinosaurs. And you were able to when you breed them, they pop eggs, and you can take those eggs and store them in like refrigeration within the game. I was selling those eggs for like $20 to $25 a clip sometimes. An egg, a digital item that doesn't exist.
Right.
And I mean, there was a market for a while where if I would spend $400, I'd make $1,200 back within the next couple of days. Because what you're spending it on is different stats to help your breed, your lineage of dinosaurs become stronger. Because that hatch, their stats are higher. And they can only level up so much. I think there was like 140 levels they can go. So if they were hatched at level 10, they can only go up to 150. But if they're hatched at level 115, all of a sudden they go up to 250 or whatever it is. I think there's a max at like 249. But they can get all the way up. So, and then they're different characteristics of it and stuff, and different color patterns, things like that become very rare. And so we had this down to a science where we literally had a factory, and I had people that would work for me in the game. Quite literally, this was their job, and they'd get paid real money because all they were doing was breeding. Our buddy Paco was out there. He was just breeding dinosaurs all day long, and he'd make real money doing it. And the trade was this in-game currency. Now, if you go do that today, you probably couldn't find anybody that's going to want to trade real money for it at all, period, whatsoever. And you see that market crash because there's no longer a need for it. But it's the best example that I could come up with, how you can take something that quite literally does not exist, but there's value to it. And it happens in games across the way. I mean, you can go on eBay right now and go look at World of Warcraft and find items that are on there. And all you're doing is trading time for an asset that somebody needs.
Right.
It might not be something you're holding physically. It might be something you just crave, you want, you desire in this world. Or if this is a game you like to play and you want to accomplish something in it, and like this is your mission, I mean, what's the difference, Mr. Phillips, of like you selling somebody a piece of software or me selling somebody an egg in a video game?
No, it's the same thing. You're kind of like you're like the original NFT guy.
So that's a great point of what the NFTs are, except the only difference is when you bought a fucking NFT, you couldn't do shit with it except for look at it. And I can go take a picture of it.
That was the dumbest fucking thing. That was the dumbest thing ever.
I was so happy when that crashed because I kept telling people, you are an idiot.
Yep.
What do you do? You are an idiot. You're buying digital art. You can't do anything. At least in the video games, there was like transactional things you're doing with it. Maybe
Right.
still an idiot because it's just art, but it gave you the opportunity to utilize it in some capacity and then remonetize it. Whereas the NFTs, it was just, let me just use a random image generator and then sell it to people and do what with it.
Remember a
Download
few
it?
year ago, there was like digital real estate. You remember that? That was a thing.
That was right. And that still is a thing. So
It's so dumb.
and that's still popping up. Though a lot of that stuff fizzled off because people were trying to create like games around that and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But like the metaverse that Mark Zuckerberg was trying to build was doing something similar, right?
Yeah.
Creating this land where eventually you were going to see brands go in there and buy this real estate. And there's, again, like World of Warcraft type places. There's a game called Second Life that does a lot of that stuff too, where like you can go in there, like people will spend, like they will make a career out of being a digital realtor where they're spending millions of in real life dollars to buy like planets or like islands or something within the game, but it's
So
monetized.
strange.
And so what is the difference? And so again, back to the weave here, bringing that back to the concept of Bitcoin and this decentralization or really just like living in this digital world where you don't have a tangible asset. There's logic to it. And I think I understand that aspect of it to a degree. The vision to see that far in the future, to me, that's not just some Joe Schmo tech bro. You know, there's tons of them out there, and everyone's got an idea.
Sure.
You talk to anybody in tech, you go to any Silicon Valley mixer, everybody, ideas are a dime a dozen. Everybody you talk to, Mr. Phillips, even the gutter guys outside, they got ideas too. The vision to be able to craft it, execute it, deploy it, make sure it's secure, and then to kind of foster an adoption where there are other cryptocurrencies, but Bitcoin is the de facto one, right? Everybody knows what Bitcoin is.
Sure.
Nobody knows what half these other ones are. To be able to do that takes a degree of discipline that I think you only get when you've been at the helm of something big,
Right.
like launching a company or launching multiple companies.
Or like launching the biggest social media platform.
Well, not the biggest, but yes, one of the biggest. Yes. So I don't know. That's my case. That's where I'm going to
an
rest
interesting
on.
one.
I thought it was
It's
an
an
interesting
interesting
topic
one.
just to kind of throw around. Probably more
Yeah.
me just like speaking to you and telling you the story here
I
than
like
we're
it.
used to. But I thought
a fan.
it's what I wanted to get off my chest a little bit because I've been hearing about it, but listening to it. I'm like this. I want to talk through this.
You've been amped up about this one.
Yeah, well, like so for me, I mean, you know this, but a lot of people out there might not. Like, I guess for both of us, really, part of what we do this for, I think, is sometimes we have our own ideas or our own thoughts, and just like talking about it allows us to like talk through it. And if the other person doesn't poke holes in it, you can kind of poke holes in it yourself because you're getting it out there. You're like thinking about it. Like, as I say it, like,
Right.
oh, does this sound stupid as shit, or does this sound pretty convincing?
Oh, 100%. 100. Dude, listen, there are many times on this podcast when we're recording, I have an idea, and then once I speak it and I actually say it to you, I'm like, one of two things happens. Usually it's either like, well, that didn't come out anything like it was in my head, or B, I just kind of disproved what I thought in my head as I said it out loud to you. So,
Right.
you know, we do that all the time.
That's the realest part of this, baby. We're trying to be
Yeah.
real about it. We're trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
If you have your own suspicions or have evidence either for or against Jack Dorsey or for somebody else, we'd love to know what they are. Drop us a comment below. Spotify, YouTube, Rumble, Instagram, X, Jack Dorsey's own home planet right there. Like and subscribe. We're happy to have you here with us. But we want to know, what do you guys think? Mr. Phillips, send us home with some parting words.
Jackie D, hit us up. Let us know if it's you, baby. I know you're listening. He's a big fan of the show, I heard.
Could you imagine? We'll just get him on here. We'll ask him point blank.
Yeah.
Maybe he'll tell us what he
There
wants
you
to
go,
Lex.
guys. Big announcement. Jack Dorsey will be on next week. No, I'm kidding. I don't want to be
He
sued.
might be. He might be.
I don't want to be sued by like Jack Dorsey's camp.
False advertising right there. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for stopping by. Raise your glasses, everyone. I'm out. So
Later.
we got to wrap it up. So long, everybody.